if you're cool, I would like to give a real small subset of my new lesson, which is completely different. I'd like to do the intro, which is just like 2 minutes, and then I'd like to talk about a concept, which is called reserve accounting. Okay. And we'll just go from there, and we'll see how it connects to what we already know. And then at the end, I'll just close out with a conclusion, because I think it sort of wraps it all together. Mm-hmm. So, all right.
Sounds good. Let's go for it.
Okay. So this is my introduction to my lesson, my new lesson. It's just about 2 minutes long. You and I must worry. We must worry. We must worry about money. We must worry about bills and credit cards and debt collectors and balancing our budget and bankruptcy. We must worry about penalties and punishment if we don't or can't pay our bills. And if we die before paying them, our children must worry. This is because you and I can't create money. We are users of the currency. The federal government of the United States creates money. It issues the currency. The federal government does not need to worry about money. Every dollar of federal spending is and has always been paid for with created currency. And since that's true, it logically extends that federal taxes, although very important, do not and cannot pay for anything. The federal government of the United States does not need to worry about bills or credit cards or debt collectors or balancing the budget or bankruptcy. It does not need to worry about penalties or punishment if they can't pay their bills, because it is literally impossible for them to not be able to pay them. Modern monetary theory, or MMT, demonstrates that for the richest country, the most resource-rich nation in the history of the world, their capabilities to provide for its people are vastly greater and more flexible than we are told. MMT reveals that big things are possible right now and were possible decades ago. So why don't they do it? The United States has an abundance of real resources, yet they withhold that abundance from the many, leaving the many to fight over the scraps. Our government manufactures scarcity, even though it has more than enough resources to provide for all. They punish its people for making bad decisions, even though they could easily create a world where we don't have to face these terrible decisions in the first place. They do this because our federal representatives are legally bribed to do it. Learning MMT will stop the corrupt from doing bad things. Learning MMT will stop the corrupt from stopping us from doing good things. That's it.
That's solid. That sums it up.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's the main
so MMT I see as a MMT I see as the child at the end of The Emperor Has No Clothes, or The Emperor's New Clothes. It's pointing out, wait a minute, they're naked. And then everybody starts questioning, holy shit, they're naked. I'd never noticed that before. And, so the concept that I want to talk about is called reserve accounting. And this is underneath everything that we've already spoken about. So it blows my mind. I read this paper, I don't remember when, near the end of the year or something, by Stephanie Kelton. And she wrote this paper in an effort of trying to prove Warren Mosler, who's the founder of MMT, wrong. And ended up proving him right, that taxes don't fund federal spending because taxes are destroyed when they come in. And it turns out that the reason that that's true is, or how you demonstrate that that's true, is to trace through the accounting of how money goes through the system. And it sounds complicated. It blew my mind that I have to now, not just economics, now I have to understand accounting to understand economics. And it's actually quite simple. So I want to describe reserve accounting, which starts off with, and doing this gives an even clearer picture of why MMT is correct. It makes it make sense. So you and I have a bank account, at my Wells Fargo on Fork Landing Road. And a lot of people have a bank account, and a lot of businesses have a bank account at that branch. Mm-hmm. And let's say that there's about $300 million in that branch in total in the bank accounts. Then there's another bank in a more rich town on Big Road, Wells Fargo in another town. A lot of people and businesses have bank accounts in that branch. And let's say there's $2 billion in bank accounts at that branch. So there's Wells Fargo banks all across the country. And billions and billions in all these branches total. They're all managed by Wells Fargo Corporate. And Wells Fargo itself has a bank account at the central bank, which for us is the Federal Reserve. Okay? So we have bank accounts. They have bank accounts, but they call their bank accounts reserves. It's just a different name. Same thing. So Wells Fargo has about $600 billion in reserves at the Federal Reserve at the central bank. And that's only a percentage of the total bank accounts that they have. Because you only have, they only have to have like 10% reserves or something like that. I don't know specifically the number. So it's not the total. It's a percentage, which is $600 billion around. So every bank has a bank account, has a reserve account at the Federal Reserve. So Capital One has $690 billion, whatever. Chase Manhattan has $830 billion. Santander Bank has however many billion. And all these banks have bank accounts have reserves at the Federal Reserve. And it's like a spreadsheet. It's like a spreadsheet. Name of bank, how much you got. Very simple. So the Federal Reserve, the central bank, is the top bank. There's no banks, they don't have banks. There's no global bank. There's no universe bank. There's something called the World Bank, but they don't have bank accounts in it. It's just for basically hegemony, basically. It has nothing to do with... So the Federal Reserve, the central bank, is the top bank. That's it. And so the central bank is the bank's bank. Okay? All right, so that's the basis of it. And now all we have to do is show a few examples of how it works. And then for me, it all becomes much clearer of how MMT, what it means to create money, what it means to destroy money, what it means to money moving around the system, and why it's so simple to do these things, why money really isn't an object. Mm-hmm. So let's say Grandma has $30,000 at Chase Manhattan. Okay. Chase Manhattan has $830 billion in reserves at the central bank. And let's say that Grandma is due $300 billion. Grandma is due $300 in Social Security. So how does that work? So the Social Security Administration determines Grandma's due $300. Social Security Administration talks to the Treasury, talks to the Federal Reserve, and then this is what happens. Federal Reserve increases Chase Manhattan's reserves by 300. And all they do is they go into the spreadsheet and they change 830 billion, and they change the third to last zero to a 3. So they add $300 to it by just changing that number in the spreadsheet. And then the bank, they say that the Federal Reserve says that this is for Grandma. And then Chase Manhattan does the same exact thing, goes into the spreadsheet in their local branch for Grandma and changes 30,000 to 30,300. And it's exactly the same as if you manage your kid's allowance in a spreadsheet. So your kid has $36 and you want to give them $6. You go into the spreadsheet, you change the 36 to a 42. You have just, as far as your kids are concerned, you have just created $6 just because you made a number bigger in a spreadsheet. And that's exactly the same as what the central bank does, is just changes numbers up and down in a spreadsheet. That is how money is created. That's it. And actually, in my presentation, right at this point, I would show a video of Ben Bernanke saying, actually read what he says. He says, the banks have accounts with the Federal Reserve, just like you and I have an account with a commercial bank. To lend to a bank, the Federal Reserve simply uses a computer to mark up the size of the account. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. So money is created because you type a number into a spreadsheet. That's what it means to create money. So China wants $1 trillion. Okay, 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0. Enter. You gave him $1 trillion. There's no stress involved. So this, these scaremongering of China's going to redeem all their bonds and destroy the whatever. The $1 is really not that different from 1 trillion. There's no resources involved in paying back a bond. It's just Chinese citizens and companies saying, I want to redeem my bond. They're not going to do that because they make money by turning them over. It's welfare for the rich. So that's example number one. That's example number one. And if you have any questions or clarification, please stop me. Example number two is the opposite way. We need to pay our taxes. So I have a bank account at Wells Fargo. I have $1,000. Wells Fargo has $600 billion in reserves. So I send in my tax return and a $100 check to the IRS. The IRS tells the Treasury tells the Federal Reserve, and then they communicate with Wells Fargo, and they decrease the reserves from $600 billion down to whatever, $599, whatever it is, by $100. And then they say that's for Jeff. And then Wells Fargo does the same with my bank account, changes 1,000 to 900. That the money that was deducted doesn't go anywhere. That's how it's destroyed. It's destroyed simply because you lowered a number. So if you write a number onto a piece of paper, if a child writes a bill onto a piece of paper and then they erase it, where did the money go? The question is it's like, what's the question even? Where does money go? When you erase something, where does it go? When you lower points on a scoreboard, where does it go? Where do those points go? So that's what it means to destroy money. So that's example number two.
But don't most people go, oh, no, wait a minute. No, they took that $100 out of your account and then they put it into the Federal Reserve and then they use that $100 to pay for taxes.
Actually, something is done with the money, but it has nothing to do with paying for stuff. It's just they somehow keep track of it in an accounting sense. But I have multiple pieces of evidence from economists and so on that say there is no practical use for that money. That money is never saved up for future spending. It's just like the Social Security trust funds. There are trust funds that so-called pay for Social Security, but they don't. It's like the gold standard. The gold standard is, we can do whatever we want to do as long as we have the resources to do it.
Right.
For the federal government. And so if we have the resources to do something, you can create the currency to do it. There is no inflation involved in doing so if you have the resources. And the gold standard changes that. What the gold standard does is we can do whatever we want as long as we have the resources to do it, as long as it's not more than the gold that we have. So it's just an artificial limitation. And it's the same with the trust funds and Social Security, and that's the same with what happens with taxes. Like something happens, but it's not actually to pay for anything. It's just this particular accounting thing. And significantly, it's just to create the lie. The trust funds create the lie. Because when they say Social Security is going broke, they're talking about the trust funds. But it's like if you keep track of how much your kid has in allowance, but you actually have more money than that, but you say you have $40, and then they get down to zero, they spend it all, you get it down to zero, and they say, I really need something, like school told me that I have to get it, it's an emergency. Would you say, well, I'm sorry, you don't have any money in this, I kept track and you don't have any more money, I can't give it to you. I mean, that's just a horrible thing to do. You could follow those rules if you want to, but you're choosing to create these artificial rules to do so when you could easily give them the money to take care of that.
Right.
So, and then there's just one more example, which is, so marking up an account is just changing a number to be bigger. Marking down an account is changing a number to be smaller. And that's when money is born, and that's when money dies. So it's really clarifying for me, like to actually sort of feel how the money moves around like that. It makes it more concrete for me to understand all of the things that I've learned so far with MMT. That it's really just numbers in a spreadsheet. I mean, the physical money comes later. Like if customers want money, they will go to their banks, and the banks will say, I need 20,000 in ones. They'll deduct that from the reserves and send a few satchels of ones. And so there's one more example. and that is a paycheck. So I have a bank account at Wells Fargo. My company has a bank account at TD Bank, and they have 100,000, and they hand me a paper check for $100. I give that check to Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo communicates that check to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve communicates with both banks, and then that same thing happens. My company's bank reduces their bank account by 1,000. Federal Reserve reduces their bank's reserves by 1,000, and then it's opposite on my side. My bank's reserves are increased by 1,000 by changing the number, and then Wells Fargo increases my bank account by 1,000. And this is how money moves through the economy. This is called the Federal Reserve System. And every single day, $5 trillion goes through the Federal Reserve System, moves from one bank's reserves to another. $5 trillion every day, which is about $2 quadrillion a year. And that's how money moves through the system. That's reserve accounting. And it's not that complicated. I mean, it's odd. It's odd because of what we've been taught. But that's reserve accounting. So I'm hoping that's clear, and that you see how it connects to. And so let me ask your reaction to it first.
Well, it is pretty clear, and it's one of the things that I think that when people hear it, it's so simple and clear that it almost, because I think part of this sort of misinformation campaign is you'll never understand. It's too complicated. You'll never figure it out. The economy and the Federal Reserve it's only for PhDs in economics to figure out. So when it's broken down in so simplistic terms, I think sometimes it's just too hard for people to accept.
Yeah, it has to be more. I'm not this smart.
Right.
It can't be this easy. I'm not this smart. Yeah, and there's no effort to teach it.
Right.
I mean, there's no effort to teach it at all. I mean, MMT economists, I guess. I don't know where else, but I don't know of any schools aside from MMT-related schools that teach this. I think the nature of electronics makes it real easy to hide stuff, just like voting. Voting booths are electronic based. It's so easy to cheat.
Yeah.
It's so easy to cheat. That's why paper ballots counted in public is the only way to go, because we can see the paper, we can't see the electrons. So, yeah, it's an amazing concept. It's just an amazing concept. That's what underlies everything. That's it. That's it for the reserve accounting part.
Yeah, it's that simple. It doesn't need to be any more convoluted than that. And I think when people slowly start waking up to it, then it makes how are we going to afford to pay for these things makes that even more ridiculous.
Yep.
Because it's just like, well, no, we can do all of this. So,
yep. And the Green New Deal thing, and I know that's obviously I think it's probably you'd say that's your biggest issue, climate change. Have you heard the two recent articles, findings or whatever, like of a cloudless future at the end of the century? Did you hear that one? Cloudless future. I mean, I don't really know it in detail, but there's a study that says that there won't be much clouds at all at the end of the century, and clouds are what significantly prevent the sun from baking the earth. So that's really scary. I mean, really, really scary. I can send you a link on that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I've heard so many things that are terrifying. The ocean's dying. They literally call it, scientists in the Arctic call it the methane gas, the methane bomb. There's all this methane in the polar ice cap.
Permafrost.
Yeah, and since they're melting at such an alarming rate, it's going to be released at too large of a level, at too short of amount of a time, like a bomb, and it's going to eliminate the air, breathable air.
And that was actually related to the other article that I saw just a few days ago, which is it is likely, no matter what we do, even if we did 100% of the Paris Climate Agreement, which obviously isn't enough, but it is likely that in 30 years, 2050, that the Arctic is going to be 37 degrees hotter on average.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, I can send you those two links. It's
yeah, it's pretty alarming, and it's why it's like and again going back to that video I did with Fidel Kaboub about how MMT and the Green New Deal together, how that would be the thing that could literally at least give us a shot at reversing it overnight or in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, so part of it is like, so might as well give up kind of a thing. And
right.
I feel like it's even more urgent because we need to be the ones to make those decisions. And if we don't understand it, if we don't understand how the economy works, we cannot make those decisions. We're going to just be allowing, the billionaires to be the solutions to all the problems that they created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is pretty brutal. So
yep.
You said you wanted to kind of give a summary of everything.
Yeah. So that really changes things for me. Like I based my entire new presentation on that because, as I said, I really feel like it's clarifying. So yeah, I would like to. This is about maybe 4 minutes long, something like that. This is the conclusion. So it's like when you understand it, and the video that I originally did with you, was a wonderful experience. But I'm a completely different person as far as how the knowledge of how I would do it this time. Like I still hear from people that say that was really good, and that's really exciting. But at the same time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know so much more now. You got to see the new one. So this is about 4 minutes long. This is the conclusion to the lesson, which is sort of rounding out some of the beginning stuff and goes a little bit farther. So here it goes. So the conclusion, how are you going to pay for it? Our federal representatives, media, and so-called experts incessantly tell us that it is not possible to give us the things that would help us not die, suffer, go bankrupt, or be unemployed. Oops. Our representatives tell us that they can't give us these things, even though they really want to. They tell us they can't because if they dared even try, it would cause out-of-control inflation, dramatically raised taxes, wasted taxpayer dollars, and the ballooning debt and deficit would bankrupt our children when the bills come due. And actually, let me take a quick aside here. I find it really, really funny that they say we must tax the rich in order to pay for stuff. Okay, so let's tax the rich, and they've paid for stuff. We now have that stuff. It's been paid for by the rich. And yet at the same exact time, they tell us our grandchildren are going to go broke when the bills come due because the debt's going to be out of control. But wait a minute, you just told us that it was paid for by the rich. So both of these are lies. But they tell us these lies at the same time, which makes no sense. We don't pay for things twice. So, okay. Our representatives tell us that there is nothing more important than being fiscally responsible. Not even preventing death, suffering, bankruptcy, unemployment are more important than fiscal responsibility. Because China and economic Armageddon, and of course, how are you going to pay for it? Modern monetary theory reveals that for the federal government of the richest country, the most resource-rich nation in the history of the world, these concerns for fiscal responsibility are not just economically inaccurate, they are economically nonsensical. The United States has an abundance of real resources sitting idle or underutilized or being used inefficiently or immorally. Yet they withhold that abundance from the many, leaving the many to fight over the scraps. This creates a scarcity mindset. And I changed this because of AOC. I added this because of AOC. People say, I deserve what I have and more. You deserve less or nothing. And if you have less, it is not because society is unjust. It's because you're poor, lazy, black, stupid, a woman, or you came to this country illegally.
You didn't work hard.
And You didn't work hard enough. And this is what they use to justify themselves being horrible.
Right.
So they don't want to, like you said in the Fidel video, which was brilliant. Actually, you quoted, I think, a friend. We could easily give homeless people homes. Or why don't we just admit we're not a Christian country?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like we have to create these excuses so we don't feel horrible about ourselves. We need to, put it on someone else. So while this behavior is terrible and disgusting, what is truly disgraceful is the system that allows it to happen. Our government manufactures scarcity, even though they have more than enough to provide for all. They punish its people for making bad decisions instead of making the system into making their country into a place where we don't have to be faced with these decisions, these horrible decisions to begin with. And because of this scarcity to a significant degree, we have to be terrible to each other just to survive. So it's not like billionaires you can't become a billionaire without hurting other people. I think that's pretty obvious by politicians, which makes them look less at us, which creates laws and destroy unions and steps out of getting the government out of the people's hands.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted this yesterday. I said immigrants didn't steal your jobs, billionaires did.
Yeah, that's like that. Actually, I use that example quite a lot. Why are we being angry at the immigrant who the CEO chose to hire, screwing both?
Right.
But we're angry at the immigrant that so-called stole our job. It's just such a stupid thing. So because of this scarcity, I said that. And this actually reminds me as well as lesser of two evil voting. So it's like, centrists will say you are the reason we have Trump because you didn't vote for Hillary or you voted for Jill Stein or you didn't vote at all. It's your fault. And this is that same thing, like AOC said in that video a couple days ago. This is because of a scarcity mindset. Mm-hmm. We have to be horrible to each other because the system puts us in a position where we have to make horrible decisions. And choosing between Hillary and Trump was a really bad decision. I voted for Hillary, and I will never do that again. But a lot of people didn't, and 10% or something of Bernie, whatever it was, stupid stuff. So, okay, our federal representatives manufacture scarcity. They withhold that abundance from the many because they are legally bribed to do it. Our federal representatives would rather be legally bribed into millionairedom by billionaires than to help the people, no matter how desperate they are. And this is a great quote that I changed, but I got from somebody else. Billionaires fund millionaires to make thousandaires fear hundredaires.
That's a great quote.
That's Politics 101.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
Since our federal government won't provide for us, the many are left desperate. And with no alternatives, we are pushed into the arms of for-profit private corporations for our everyday survival. We are forced into private debt, including bank loans, credit cards, car loans, student loans, home loans, payday loans, debt because we have terrible health care, and debt because we have no health care at all. And what a coincidence. These for-profit private companies who profit off of our unemployment, our bankruptcy, our suffering, and our death just so happen to be the same billionaires that bribe our politicians. MMT reveals that big things are possible right now. The only thing we need to do is to figure out what the people need to survive, figure out how to do it morally, efficiently, and without inflation, and then do it. If the people don't understand how our economy actually works, then what is the point in even discussing policy at all of any kind? What is the point when our conceptions of what policies are possible and not possible are so far off as to be meaningless? And there is no point, and I think that's the point. And it reminds me of the fable of a bunch of blind people encountering an elephant and trying to describe the different pieces of it. How are you going to pay for it? Especially when asked by a federal representative, this question is deeply sinister. And the technical answer to it is congressional appropriations. Create money by making numbers bigger. We are a fiat currency. If you have the real resources to do it, then you can choose to create the money to do it. You just need the votes. But this is the answer that I believe should be given, and I think it was exactly in my first presentation. We will pay for it by getting you out of office and replacing you with someone who will never ask us that question again. They will do whatever it takes to get the job done. And until that day, 100% of our energy and time will be spent making your life a living hell until you either give it to us or get out of office. You and I need to worry about money. We don't need to worry about money when it comes to the federal government of the richest nation in the history of the world. Learning MMT will not stop the corrupt from doing bad things. Learning MMT will stop the corrupt from stopping us from doing good things. That's it. Thanks.
Well, awesome, Jeff. I really appreciate you taking the time, and obviously you've been doing so much more research since the first time we spoke 9 months ago, and how what you're doing is helpful to boil the message down and get very clear and concise about it, on how it can help as you woke me up, waking more people up to what MMT is, and how it's just the current monetary system is just another way that the ruling class keeps us divided and fighting with each other and blaming immigrants and this, because capitalism is cruel. We have to fight, you and I have to fight over the same job, and all of that stuff. So it's really eye-opening, and I really appreciate you reaching out to give me this update.
Well, thank you. If I may, before we get off, there's actually one somewhat related thing that I wanted to bring up, if that's okay. And that is UBI versus federal job guarantee. I've been thinking about that a lot. And there's nothing wrong with giving, and I know that you have, I don't know if it was before you knew MMT or whatever it was, but somehow you have been intrigued by UBI. That's fair.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to urge you to consider the federal job guarantee. Federal job guarantee is what creates a just world. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could talk about that for hours. I'm not going to talk about it now, but I almost want to cry thinking about how beautiful and elegant and simple the federal job guarantee is, because it would allow people to stand up. That's not its purpose, but that is a side effect. It would allow people to stand up, and it would change everything. It wouldn't be scarcity anymore, because the people would be able to say, stop, you can't abuse me anymore. I will leave. If you can't tell your boss to go screw himself, then we don't have a federal job guarantee. We don't have full employment. But UBI is giving people a check. So they define the problem as things are too expensive. And so their solution is, if things are too expensive, then what's the natural solution, which is give them a check. And that makes sense in a way. But this is what UBI doesn't solve. UBI doesn't solve, why are things too expensive? Why are things unjustly expensive? Why do things that shouldn't have a price have a price? Healthcare and education and so on. Why do they have a price at all? And why does everyone have a fair shake to make a decent wage? And I think the answers to those questions are no. The answers to those questions are, I don't know what the answers are specifically, but the point is that giving a check to someone to make things cheaper doesn't answer any of those questions, doesn't address any of those problems.
In that regard, yes. How I've heard UBI explained, universal basic income, is, and I like the federal jobs guarantee. I don't know that it needs to be either or. I think what UBI is making more sense to me is when we start getting into automation, which is happening. So if robots are doing, if machines are doing all the work, what are we going to do? Who's going to have a job? And more importantly, as is said, Jimmy Dore said this: robots don't shop. So robots don't do stand-up comedy. Comedy. They don't do stand-up comedy. They don't do a lot of things. They don't play basketball. They don't do dance or do any artistic or sport or anything like that. So that's where, and I think you even might have mentioned this during one of my super chats, is that you could have UBI with a federal jobs guarantee, because that's actually the point, is that a universal basic income, macroeconomically speaking, is really bad. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be allowed to have a check or shouldn't be allowed to
live a life of no work, or whatever the philosophies are behind that. There's nothing wrong with that on an individual basis. Macroeconomically, that would be a disaster. And there's economic papers that say, it would be really bad. But a federal job guarantee supplemented by a basic income, not a universal basic income, but a basic income for those who can't or shouldn't work. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the federal job guarantee is what creates a just society and addresses those why concerns of why are things too expensive? Why? Because the people will stand up and say, healthcare is not given to us by the federal government because they give this as a tool to private industry to beat us over the head with. I dare you to stand up. Here's your healthcare. Try. I'll take it away from you. So, so the answer is federal job guarantee plus a basic income on top of it. And actually, there's more than 100 articles that say that Martin Luther King wanted a universal basic income, and I actually did some research on this. He didn't. He wanted a job guarantee and a basic income for those who can't or shouldn't work.
Right.
So that's the other thing I wanted to say, UBI, because I know that that's a big deal with you.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, and it's a great thing to discuss, and I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much. Where can people find your work online, Jeff?
Twitter is the best place. The second best place is Facebook, Citizens Media TV. The pinned tweet in particular on Twitter is a wonderful place to start. It has tons of resources and mini lessons and so on. And on Facebook as well, I post some stuff. The pinned post has, stuff as well. So there.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much coming over from Citizens Media TV. I really appreciate you taking the time. And everybody out there, this is like a two-part video. So I hope you watch both of them. And, of course, go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood. And the Progressive Comedy Tour is coming to Texas in April. We're coming to Salt Lake City and Boise in May, and the East Coast in June 12th.
I will be in Philly.
Oh, awesome. Great. We'll see you in
Yep,
Philly.
and I'm bringing a guitar. I'm bringing a guitar to do the Ron's theme song. I harmonized Ron's theme song for his theme show, for his podcast. So I'm very excited about that.
That's fantastic. Well, this is the great thing, folks. If you come out to the live shows, you're going to meet people like Jeff. I mean, Tim Black, I think, is going to be at our show in D.C., as is Lee Camp. Samira Khan's coming to the show in New York City. So this East Coast tour, June 12th through the 18th, we might add more dates. It's pretty amazing. We're doing D.C., Baltimore, 2 nights in Philly, New Haven, Connecticut, New York City, and Boston. So again, go to grahamelwood.com. Like, subscribe, share these videos, watch the ads all the way through. If you click skip ad, I do not get paid. If you have a YouTube Red subscription, anytime you watch one of my videos, I get paid. A lot of great ways to support the show. Thank you so much, and you're all political vigilantes.
Bye.